Hi everyone, I'm Jessica, and welcome to another installment of the supplies and materials needed for quilting. So today we're on the 6th day. We've already done this for quite a bit. We've gone over a lot of the supplies, but today we're going to cover pins and then pressing supplies. Now pins aren't something that I usually use when I quilt, and if you've been following me, you know that I don't use them. When we go through this quilt along, I try to show you where you will use pins if you'd like to, and I demonstrate how to use them. But when I'm making the blocks, other than the demonstration, you won't see me using the pins. But still, you might want to try it because lots of quilters love pins. And there is a lot to choose from. So let me just tell you what you might want to try and then you can experiment from there. When we're piecing our blocks or the rows of a quilt, you want to look for, I would say, a quilter's pin. The pins are usually pretty long, anywhere from 1.5 to 2 inches, and that is so that you can manipulate them into the blocks and still have room to work. They're not like really short little pins when you're just piecing a quilt on a machine. There's different options for the pin heads. Some are like large, some have numbers, so they help you track the order that you're going in, which is helpful. There are also pin heads that are made of glass. The glass head pins are nice because if you're working with them by the iron and you go over the top of them, they're glass, so they won't melt. The plastic headed pins will melt, so you have to take care not to use those by your iron. I have one set of pins here, and these are by Clover. They're called quilting pins. They have glass heads, so they're heat resistant, and they're nice and long. The other thing that I have found to be important anytime I've used a pin in quilting specifically is that the shaft of the pin is really thin. So if you have a large shaft here on your pin, it's gonna leave more of an opening in your fabric. So if I'm ever using a pin for quilting, I use the thinnest pins I could find. Now, if I'm making a bag or a garment, that might not be the case. You might want a more heavy-duty shaft that's thicker, but specifically for quilting, if I'm gonna use it, I like it really thin. I grabbed a few pins to show you, so I definitely think you'll be able to see the difference even though this is on camera. So if you can tell, this has a plastic head. It's a large pin, but the shaft of this is super thick. I got these once and I wasn't really sure what I was looking for. It was kind of in the beginning of my journey, and they're, for me, totally wrong for quilting. They leave this huge opening in the fabric. It's difficult to get it in and out. You can see that they're not as shiny as the rest. These were like kind of cheap and it shows. They're not as shiny as the rest, so they don't like glide in. They feel like matte kind of. So I like this pack, I never use them for quilting. This one I got once with, it was free with a fabric order, and I actually super love this. I know it has a plastic head, so I'm always careful by the iron with it, but this shaft is really thin, it's really sharp, it's shiny, and it goes in and out. There's no friction on it. I love it. I think I got 4 of them just like tucked into the fabric when I bought it, so I do love those. And then this is the one I showed you before with the glass head. So these two are really similar to each other in shaft size. If you'll look, the glass headed pin has a longer shaft, like by this amount, but they're both long enough to actually just work good. So just keep in mind when you're looking for pins, there's a lot of different choices and you're probably gonna have to experiment. Another option in place of pins are called wonder clips. So wonder clips are these little clips, and they have a flat side that goes on the bottom of your work and a rounded side that goes on the top. So if I was going to use this to pin fabric, I'd pin it like this. This flat side would be running against my machine because it's flat and it doesn't get caught on anything. So these are nice. You can, if you don't want to use pins, you can try these. You can put them at your seams and kind of hold them. I use these for when I'm making bags, pouches and bags, and they work fantastic. Occasionally, if I need them for a long row that I'm worried if it won't match up, I probably would use these instead of the pins, but it's totally up to you. It's your preference. You can get these in big packages like this. You can buy them brand name. They usually come on like a little sleeve and they're clipped on the side there, but they're called wonder clips. So that is another option for pinning. Now let's talk about ironing. So here I have my ironing supplies. Now, ironing for quilting is a little bit different than traditional ironing. So there's kind of two steps to it. The first step, you could iron just like regular. So here I have fabric. I'm actually making a bag with this, so I washed it. There is, two methods to preparing your fabric. You could either pre-wash it before you use it or not pre-wash it. Really, it's all comes down to personal preference. There's no right or wrong. You get to choose which one you want to do. If you pre-wash your fabric and if you decide to pre-wash your batting, then after you wash your quilt the first time, it will not shrink because everything will already be pre-shrunk. If you do not wash your fabric and you don't pre-wash your batting, after the first wash, the quilt will shrink and it will have a crinkled and textured look to it. So you have to decide which one of those is right for you. I find that if I pre-wash the fabric, it takes out, whatever the fabric manufacturer uses when they manufacture the fabric. It's kind of like stiffening. It's not really starch, but it gives the fabric some body. So if you pre-wash, you're really gonna have to press this good before you use it. If you decide not to pre-wash, you can choose what pieces you iron and before you start quilting, because some of them are really nice and flat and some of them are still wrinkled. When you're ironing a piece before you start quilting, you can iron it just like normal. You can go back and forth and you can run the iron along the fabric just to get out every single wrinkle. Once you're making your quilt though, once you're making your blocks and the steps in it, we don't typically iron back and forth like this. We press. It's more of an up and down movement. You're setting the hot iron on the seam of the block or whatever you're pressing, and it's like an up and down. Move it over, up and down to set it. If you do this with your block, you can distort it and make it misshaped and not the right size. So these are the two irons that I use. I love them both. When I first started quilting, I had just a basic iron from Target. So you can use anything. I think it was probably a $20 iron and it lasted for a while. It was fantastic. The more I got into it, the more I wanted to invest in my iron. Just have it have like really great functions, have it be a really fantastic iron. And these are the two irons that I got. So they're both by the same brand, Oliso. And this is their mini iron. This mini iron is fantastic, and you could even use this mini iron in place of your full-size iron. You don't even have to have a full-size iron if you don't want. This is a wonderful, wonderful iron. So it's mini sized. It doesn't have like a handle like this one does. It has this little like groove that your hand fits in. And it's got a dial here for temperature. So there's an off, a 1 dot, a 2 dot, and a 3 dot. And those refer to how much heat the iron puts out. If you choose to put water in it, there's a water compartment. I don't, but if you choose to put water compartment, these are the steam buttons. And what I love so much about this iron is this plate. So the plate is really slippery and it glides so beautifully over the fabric. It has this nice point here so that you can really get into like a tight spot and press with the point of the iron if you need to. It has a really good weight to it, but it's not too heavy. So you can press full-size blocks with it. You can press little blocks with it. It's just really nice. It comes with this. This is called the sole plate. And when the iron's not in use, you can fit the the plate in here to protect it. And if you're traveling, that's a nice feature. Also, you can hang it by this if you choose to. So this is really nice for traveling too. But when the iron is in use, you don't tuck it in like that. You flip it over, and this this silicone piece can handle the heat of the iron. And you can set this hot iron when you're not using it, but when it's plugged in, to rest on this sole plate here. So I really love this iron. The cord is really long. It moves very nicely from here, so you're not worried about bending or pulling it. And I just think this is a fantastic, fantastic iron. So I'm so happy with this one. Now, the full-size iron, this is a newer one. So I used to have an older one, and then my cat ended up knocking my table over and it broke it. But this is the new one. And the new one has I think, some improvements to the older versions. Again, it has this plate. The plate didn't used to be like this, which was the only thing I didn't like about the old one. But this has it, this diamond ceramic flow plate. So it's the same plate almost as this. You can see they look almost like the steam holes and stuff are different. Obviously the size is different, but it's the same material. And this just glides so beautifully over your fabric. It's fantastic. You can easily clean it so you don't have any sticky residue if you're sometimes working with things that can be sticky, like interfacing. It has a really good point up here, so, and it's separated so you can get into an area if you're pressing clothes or something, even making garments. That's helpful, having that space there so you could really get into with just this little tip. It has different different heat settings here. So that's the minimum. Then there's a synthetic, there's a wool and silk, linen and cotton, and that's as high as it goes. Like, you can put water in this and get steam. This is your mister. If you put water in it, it will mist out of here onto your fabric. And then this is your steam button. If you have this set to not steam, you can still use this steam puff to have it steam, but it won't just constantly be running a steam for you. You can put, like I said, you can put the water in here if you like. And a really cool, I love this feature of this rolling ball so your cord doesn't get bent. And really the coolest feature of this iron, let me plug it in to show you, is that when this is a smart iron, so when my hand grabs this handle, it will lower the iron. And when my hand is not on the handle, I want to tip it so you can see. When my hand is not on this handle, it has these two mechanisms here that will lift it off of your ironing board so that it doesn't burn or scorch. And you're not constantly doing this with your iron. With other irons, you're not the mini, because the mini rests on this, but with a traditional iron, after you use it, you have to tip it up and set it like this. So you're constantly doing this. So this iron is built to eliminate that. And it can stay laying like this without burning anything underneath, because these two guards hold it up. So when I hold the handle, it's going to drop for me, and I can use it just like an iron. As long as my hand is on this handle, those two guards are down, and I can use it like a regular iron. And when I take my hand off, it lifts up. So this is like just a really cool, handy feature to have in this iron, that every time you want to use it, you can, and if you take your hand off of it, it comes back up. It was designed because ergonomically it reduces your wrist fatigue from doing this, but it is just like the handiest feature. Now, a lot of people don't like to put water in their irons because they worry that it will corrode it and rust, and you can put water in it. In your manual, it will tell you what you can do, what type of water to use, and it usually says to empty it after each use. But if that seems like a pain in the butt to you, another option is to use a water bottle. So this is just a spray bottle filled with water, and if I want to have like steam, I'll just spray and then put my iron on it, and the water will evaporate and turn into steam there, and you get kind of the same results. It's not exactly the same, I don't think, but it's close. Now the next step is to talk about your pressing board. Mine is obviously a mess because I use it all the time. But what I like to do when I'm pressing a quilt block is I use this pressing board. So this is plywood wrapped with quilt batting, wrapped with canvas. And it's actually double wrapped because it got really dirty like this, and then I put a fresh wrap on it, and now it's really dirty again, so it needs to be rewrapped. But the idea of this is that when you're pressing a block on this, there's no give to it. Like, it's really hard. It's a really hard surface. So your block isn't going to distort. You know, sometimes in an ironing board, like, it might curve like that, and then your block is misshapen. So I like to use this pressing board instead because it's a really hard surface that gives resistance, and your block stays exactly the same. It does kind of absorb heat a little bit as I press. Like, the more I press, the warmer this gets. So it kind of will press it from the back and the front of the block. So this is like very warm now. And the batting and the plywood underneath can kind of hold that heat for a little bit. And that helps kind of press your block from the back and the front without distorting it. So this is my favorite thing to press on. I always use it if I can fit it. And I made this one, so it's kind of the size of my cutting mat. It's similar to a 24-inch by a 34-inch space. I have a smaller one right next to my sewing machine that I use if I need to press. And then I have another one that's about the size next to my sewing machine that I can just move around if I need to. It's like an extra one. I also have an ironing board, so when I'm working with pressing a quilt top or something that is bigger than my space allows, I do press it on the ironing board. And it's not my favorite surface to press it on, but it does work. Another option for pressing is wool mats. So you can find a wool mat. A lot of quilters rave about them. Wool mats are nice because they're kind of like how I said the plywood and the batting that I use. They kind of absorb the heat and then they'll radiate it from the back and you'll put your iron on the top. So your block's getting pressed from both sides. The only drawback from wool mats in my eyes is that if you're gonna use steam, it's gonna smell like a sheep. So the second you get wool wet, it smells like sheep. So if you think that smell would be off-putting to you, then probably a wool mat is not for you. There are options though, so don't feel like I don't want to use a wool mat now. What am I gonna do? The plywood thing that I do is amazing. So I'd consider that. The other thing I didn't mention yet is starch. A lot of quilters love to use starch, and there's a couple different ways to apply it. I don't typically use starch like as a practice for all my pieces. If I do find a really wrinkly piece that I'm working with and water won't get it out, I will use starch for that. When I'm doing a type of applique called freezer paper applique, you use starch for that also. This is the one I use. I just use a spray starch, and I will just spray the piece, spray this on the piece that I want to starch, then I'll press it with the iron and starch it like that. There are other ways that you can starch where you like soak it completely in a starch, let the fabric air dry with a starch on it, and then start using it. But so there are other ways if you want to look into them, and there are tons of different types of starch. I have good results with this one. A lot of quilters love one called Best Press. So you can just, again, experiment if starch is something you want to use. What starch does, if you're wondering, is it gives body to the fabric. So when you spray this on the fabric and press it, it makes it really stiff and hard. So it's kind of more like you're cutting paper instead of cutting fabric. It's because it's stiff and hard like that, a lot of people think it's easier to get really nice sharp cuts because the fabric doesn't move at all or shift. Like it's hard and it stays in place. So if you've never used starch before, I'd recommend just giving it a try and seeing if it's for you. You don't have to though, so it's a personal decision. You can decide to use it or not, or use it sometimes and not other times. It's not an all or none. You can change your mind and you can play around with it. But I think that covers it now for pins and pressing supplies. If you have any questions on this video, just leave them in the comments below. And if not, I'll see you back here tomorrow for one more installment of supplies and materials. Thank you for following along.